All right, good morning. Brent told me that he told you guys or was going to. Brent forgot. All right. I want this first session to be more of a discussion. I think that's going to be a better way to introduce what we're going to be talking about this morning. But when you think about wanting to imitate Jesus, a lot of the times in my mind, I think about doing what he did and learning to think the way he thought. How often do we think about having our emotions conformed to the kinds of emotions Jesus experienced and felt? By the way, of all the gospels, does anybody know which gospel emphasizes Jesus' emotions the most? It's the Gospel of Mark. All throughout the Gospel of Mark, you're going to have things that Jesus felt. And so what I want to do in this session is just introduce this concept of emotions. And maybe one verse that we could use to frame what we're looking at is Proverbs 4:23, where Solomon says, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." I grew up in Minnesota, and Lake Itasca is where the Mississippi River starts. It goes all the way down to St. Louis and down to other places. The source of that river begins somewhere very far away from where it eventually ends up. The things that we say and do stem from our heart. The things that we feel also stem from our heart as well. And so part of what we're looking at is going, okay, I feel this, I feel that. Where is it stemming from? What is it saying about myself? There's two extremes when it comes to emotions. There are some people that are into emotionalism, which what I feel is what matters the most. I want to feel good. It doesn't matter what it's going to take to feel good. That's what I care about. And then Stoicism, how I feel doesn't matter at all. I just have to have duty. And the Bible is not going to be either one of those. And so we'll see that as we go through these lessons. But what I want to do in this lesson is, first of all, understand what emotions are. Secondly, what are the reasons we should steward our emotions? And I use the word steward because I think emotions are given to us by God. We have the capacity to have emotions because we're made in God's image. And so how do we steward them in a way that would please God? And then thirdly, what are some ways that we would steward our emotions? So that's what we're going to look at. Now, when it comes to, first of all, understanding what emotions are, there's no Greek word or Hebrew word in the Bible that we can go to just have this overarching understanding of what we're talking about. But we can look at different definitions that people have made about emotions that get us in the ballpark of the things that we're observing in Scripture. And so let me show you one definition of emotions that I think is really helpful. Emotions tell us what we value and what we believe, producing desires and inclinations that affect our behavior. Emotions were given in order to energize behavior and were intended by God to be a catalyst for action. If we were to chart out this definition, you'd start out with beliefs, values, and perceptions, which these are things that through study, through meditation, through dialogue with people get shaped. And so those beliefs, values, and perceptions then become the emotions that we feel. And then those emotions are the things that energize our actions and our responses. So, for example, when Jesus was in the temple and he turned over the money tables, what emotion would he have been feeling there? What was that? Anger, yes. Okay, so what would that anger that energized him to flip over the money tables, what would that have shown that he valued? His Father's house. And so I'm going to look at some other examples of this. Do you guys have any just comments or questions about this definition and this chart and how this works here? Does that make sense? All right, let's bring up a couple little kind of case studies. How about this one? Both of them are up now. A 5-year-old is rejoicing when she receives her lollipop, when she is jumping for joy and accidentally drops it in the dirt. Now she is on the ground weeping uncontrollably. What is the root cause of her rejoicing and weeping? Sugar. Yeah. So she's got this affection for lollipops, and when she has that affection met with the lollipop, she's excited and it's energizing her joy, and then it falls on the ground and she's crying now. And both emotions, the joy and the weeping and the sorrow, stem from the valuing of the lollipop. All right, what about this one? A man is stuck in traffic on the way home. Angry, he punches the steering wheel. What does he believe, value, or perceive that is causing this anger? Delay in traffic. I value my time. I value the way things ought. Is traffic bad around here? Is it okay? I used to live in Atlanta, so I don't know if I get to laugh at you or if you get to laugh at me. Okay, all right. What about Nehemiah? You remember in Nehemiah chapter 2, when Nehemiah finds out that the condition of Jerusalem is not very good? What emotion did he have? It was sadness. Well, what was he valuing that caused that emotion? The well-being of the city. And so his heart was tied to Jerusalem and how God's people were doing. When he finds out they're not doing well, it makes him sorrowful. All right. Any comments or questions just about this so far? Because we're going to add a couple layers to this. Yeah.
I mean, maybe you're going to talk about this, but do you have to know what your value system is? Like, to know what the emotions are going about? Because emotions happen pretty young people.
Yeah, this is a good question. So one of the things that I hope we accomplish in these lessons is learning how to take snapshots of ourselves. Have you ever had a moment where you had an emotional reaction to something and you couldn't even describe where it all came from? But if you can take a snapshot of that moment and go, okay, what was I valuing? What did this say about myself? I think as we go through this, we'll find that looking at this topic of emotions forces us to have some self-examination, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But we'll talk about those kinds of things. Let's add another layer to this on what emotions are. There are emotions that are unpleasant and emotions that are pleasant. I'm not using the terms evil and righteous, and you'll see why as we go through this. But what are some emotions that are unpleasant to feel? Sadness, anger, jealousy. And we're going to talk about envy tonight. Yep, isolation, loneliness, things like that. Here's a list that I have here. Envy, worry, guilt, grief, fear, anger. Now let me ask this question. What are some instances where experiencing an unpleasant emotion is appropriate? Yeah, the funeral. Is it appropriate to have an unpleasant emotion in a moment like that? Yeah, for sure. What else?
You do something wrong.
Yeah, godly sorrow. Yes. Yeah, like on the news. Yeah, if you see an old lady being beaten up, you should feel an unpleasant emotion about that for sure. Yeah. Yeah, justice. Good. Any other? Now, do you see why I say unpleasant and not evil or sinful emotions? There's an appropriate outlet for most of these emotions. You could maybe make an argument that we should never be envious. But those are some unpleasant emotions. Let's talk about pleasant emotions. And what would be some pleasant ones? Yeah, baby born. So happiness. Yeah, excitement, joy, contentment, peace, zeal, gratitude. So let's ask the inverse question to this one. What are some instances where experiencing a pleasant emotion is inappropriate? Okay, so yes, you could have too much if you really hated that person. All right, what else? Yeah, it was not the Germans created the word Schadenfreude, where you were envious of somebody and then they have a downfall, and now you have some joy about that. What was that?
Sin.
Yeah, like rejoicing in your sin, celebrating it, like Isaiah would talk about. What else? Can you think of any times in the Bible where people are having a pleasant emotion and they're commanded to stop it?
When they were worshiping the golden calf.
Yeah, Exodus 32, worshiping. They were having a party. But you guys need to stop. Any other times? James chapter 4, verse 9, let your laughter be turned to mourning You guys are having a pleasant emotion, but it's not in tune with reality. What about Romans 10, where you have the Jews who have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge? Pleasant kind of emotion, but it's inappropriate given the context. And so part of the challenge of what we're looking at here is, how do we calibrate? How do we feel the appropriate things? Because if we were to look at joy, have you ever had joy that somebody you were envious of had some kind of turmoil happen to their life? Have you had any kind of peace when maybe you shouldn't have had peace? Isn't that what the false teachers in Jeremiah were saying? Peace, peace, when there is no peace. That there are times maybe we should be more concerned about our spiritual well-being. And in that sense, we should be worried about those things when we're not living for the Lord. Comments or questions on this so far? All right, is this making sense? All right, let's then talk about some reasons that we should steward our emotions. Why should we be concerned about this topic? And the first one is that we are made in God's image. Let me just ask this question. What does it mean to be made in God's image? Yeah.
We have the capacity to express love and joy and peace. So we are able to imitate the characteristics of love.
Yes, good. Imagine when you lived in the ancient world, why did God say no graven image of me? Imagine that you were a group of people trying to depict what God is like. And some people go, well, I think God is kind of like a bull with the big, strong horns. And then other people go, well, I think he's kind of like a lamb, and we're going to make a statue of, there's the lamb people over here, and then there's the bull people over here. What's the problem with making a graven image? It can't react to anything. It is just what it is. Of all the things that God made in the world, what's the one thing that can adequately represent him? Human beings. And so we're made in God's image. And what kinds of emotions in Scripture does God experience? Anger, joy, sadness, sorrow, jealousy, grief. So if we want to be image bearers of God and reflect his character to the world, should we be people that are concerned about reflecting these kinds of emotions in the appropriate ways, not feeling pleasant emotions inappropriately or unpleasant emotions inappropriately, that we're supposed to calibrate these things. We're supposed to have the same kind of grief that God would have, the same kind of jealousy that God would have, rather than having it all mixed up in the ways that the world would train us to think about. Any other thoughts or comments about us being made in God's image and why that's a reason to steward our emotions? How often when we've thought about being made in God's image is the application made that we need to be concerned about imitating his actions? How often is it discussed we need to be imitating his emotions as well? And so that's why I think this is maybe sometimes not given as much attention. Here's another reason, though, is that emotions impact relationships. Let me just ask this question. If somebody were to describe somebody as being an emotional person, what do we mean by that? What was that? Yeah, it's normally a negative thing. They're emotional, and that's seen by what? Reactionary. They don't control their emotions. If somebody upsets them, they're going to fight back. There's somebody that, if you're a really emotional person, are you going to have a lot of really, really close friends? No. And so emotions impact relationships. Let's think about some examples of this. Can you think of any examples in the Bible where somebody was not controlling their emotions and it led to the detriment of a relationship? Yeah, how about Cain and Abel? Was that detrimental when he murdered him? I'd say so. Yeah, good. Jacob and Esau. What else? Tonight we're going to look at Saul's envy of David. And so that's going to be a case study on that when we look at that. But the Bible says this in Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Have you ever had a time where you were rejoicing and nobody was rejoicing with you? Or you were weeping and like Job's friends, they come in not to weep, or what they end up actually doing is giving you all kinds of reasons why you're in this trouble. And I'm going to give you all this advice that's going to save you. Have you ever had a time where you were weeping and people didn't match what you were experiencing emotionally? Do you want to go back to those people again when you're going? So emotions, if we handle these things the right way, are oftentimes part of the reason why we feel closer to certain people is because they have a good emotional intelligence in that way. And so it can impact it for good, impact it for bad. Any thoughts or comments on that one? All right, third reason to steward our emotions is just that God commands self-control. There is a sense of duty to this. And so how do emotions relate to self-control? If you have sinful anger, if you have sinful envy, if you have sinful jealousy, if you have sinful joy, because you're joyful in the wrong kinds of things, how many passages in the Bible say something about this is what should be in your life? Like in Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit. How many parts of the fruit of the Spirit involve emotion? And it's actually commanded. Sometimes when it comes to emotion, we talk about how, this happened to me. Like I have blue eyes, and yeah, I have anxiety, and I don't understand all the chemical things that some people experience at times. But to say that there's not habits we could develop that would mitigate or help some of those things is just not what the Bible teaches. So here's one example of this. Proverbs 16:32, whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. I saw a t-shirt not too long ago that I was half tempted to buy. It was a Genghis Khan t-shirt, and the back of it said the Genghis Khan World Tour of all the places that he conquered. And I didn't know if it might offend somebody, so I didn't buy it. But what are you more impressed with? A man who could conquer the world, or some guy that has not been in the news for anything but controls his anger? How spiritually minded are we? What's more impressive to us? And so if we're going to be concerned about emotions, we have to know that God, in so many places in the Bible, has commanded us to steward this. All right. Anything else you'd add to reasons we should steward our emotions? As we go through these lessons, we'll see, especially the impact that emotions have on one another. Yeah, Andy?
I mean, part of it would just be, it makes our lives better.
Right. It's good for you if we can learn the things that God wants us to learn about this. Yeah.
I think Romans 12:2 speaks about not conforming to the pattern of the world. So that's what we have to follow, what God is asking us to do. And so, like you said, being made in God's image means following his direction, even in terms of our regulation of our emotions.
Yeah, good. So I have a question later on this. I'll go ahead and ask this now. In our culture, is the emotionalism or the stoicism more so the air we breathe? Emotionalism. So what does the world tell us about our emotions?
They are truth.
They are truth. If I feel like I'm a different gender, I can go ahead and we can do surgeries now. If I feel like this or that happened, I have all the reason in the world to be vindictive towards this person. And then God says, no, actually, you have to control these things. Yeah, did you have something?
This is kind of where we have to recognize, we have to be careful by saying somebody's predisposed to do something, or somebody that they cannot control themselves. It's like, oh, this is just who I am, that's how it is. Cain, God, from very early in the Bible, God told Cain, why are you angry in verse 6? And he said, if you do well, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin lies at the door.
Good.
And it desires for you, but you should rule over it. God has always told us that we are not predisposed to anything. We have to be recognized. These things are in us, like you said earlier. These things God puts in us. But we have to rule over them. They cannot rule us.
Well, it's interesting in Genesis 3. In Genesis 1, God creates man to have dominion over everything. And that includes the animals. And then in Genesis chapter 3, what has dominion over man? A serpent. And then in Genesis chapter 4, how is sin described to Cain? It's crouching at the door. So we have 4 kids. And because we live on 5 acres, cats have value in our life. So each kid does have a cat now because they kill mice and stuff. And so if you watch the cats outside, they make themselves look a lot smaller than they actually are. And then when they're about to pounce on something, what do? This is how big I actually am, and this is what I'm going to do to you. That's what sin does. It always makes itself look a lot smaller than it actually is, and then it kills you. But what's Cain supposed to do in that? This predator that's crouching like a cat or like a lion, you're supposed to have dominion over this. How often is sin in the Bible described as an animal? That's one place. Romans 3 talks about our tongues being like serpents. James 3 does the same sort of thing. And what was that?
Lion, Peter.
Yeah, good. And we were created to have dominion over that. We were created to have that power. And so what's more impressive, somebody who has 15 gorillas at a zoo or somebody who controls their anger? Not the gorilla man. All right, anything else you guys want to say about this? All right, good. Yeah, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm going back to a point you made earlier. While the world, and I wouldn't say the world, while some people are pushing that you can do whatever you want, we still have other people who are pushing the right thing. So it's who you listen to.
Yes.
At this point, we cannot say the world is and we're doing what the world says. It's up to us to make sure that we're doing what God asked us to do. And we're surrounding ourselves with the people that can give us the right advice.
Good.
You know,
Yes.
we keep saying the world, but God is not looking at the world when He's judging us.
Yeah.
It's what we did, what our reactions are, how did we control ourselves? Going back to your self-control, what did we do in the moment? Did we look to God's advice rather than the world's advice? So we have to be very careful. Because I'm in education, and granted, we tell kids, you know, like they'll come and talk to us about certain things that they may not talk to their parents about. But I don't give them the advice to do whatever they want.
Yes.
I'm going to give them the right advice, which is godly advice. And I think a lot of what we see is what I wouldn't even say 50% of the world believes in that. It's what the media wants to portray or what other people want to portray. So we have to be careful just judging the world for a lot of the sinful behavior that's out there.
Yeah, good. And like what you both were touching on this too. What was Cain supposed to do? Well, if a psychologist was talking to Cain and he goes, well, I really feel angry because Abel's sacrifice was accepted and I'm angry about it. What am I supposed to do? Well, God says, do the right thing. Yeah, but I don't feel like it. Well, if you do the right thing, maybe you'll start learning to value the right thing. But let's talk then about ways to steward our emotions. And there's a few passages that we want to look at for this. Most of them will be on the PowerPoint here. But the first one is to talk to God. One of the things that we've been doing every fourth quarter in Kentucky is we've been going through a book of the Psalms until we've gone through the whole Psalms on Sunday mornings. And there's a lot of things that have been sticking out to me in doing those. But like one example in Psalm 62, the writer of the Psalm has this unwavering trust in God, even though he's surrounded by liars and evildoers. And one of the things that he says in Psalm 62, verse 8, trust in him at all times, O people, pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. How many Christians have you known who would say, I am very satisfied with my prayer life? I've never heard a Christian say, you know, I feel like I've gotten into a good rhythm in prayer. Let me add another passage to this. Philippians 4, 6, and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Before the prayer is even answered, by the way, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. All right, so what's the antidote in this text to worry or anxiety? Talk to God. Is this a promise in the Bible that if you do this, you will experience peace? Yes. Now, I don't understand certain chemical things that people might have. I think this at least talks about worrying over politics, worrying over finances, worrying over the kinds of things that Matthew chapter 6 talks about. And that if you bring your concerns to God, the promise in the Bible is that you will be guarded. Thoughts or comments on this one? Yeah.
The peace
peace of God, I don't think we give that enough consideration. And I think maybe we frame the peace of God as to what does peace look like for me. This is not what does peace look like for you. This is about what the peace of God is about. So that peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, is what now takes over my heart. So that my heart doesn't get emotions that make me feel like, well, this is the godly way to respond. No, this is not the godly way to respond. The godly way to respond is to recognize the peace of God, which is guarding my heart, keeping me from sin, and focusing my mind not on politics or all these other distractions, but on Christ Jesus.
Yeah, and what's Paul's circumstance when he writes this?
He's in prison.
He's in prison in the Roman Empire. What was the purpose of prison?
Take away his freedom.
It was to find out if you were going to die. It was a holding tank until they would determine your verdict. So that's why he says in chapter 1, I might depart, I might not. He thinks that he won't. But he's in that situation, and he says, don't be anxious about anything. Do you remember in Acts chapter 12, when the ninja angel comes and delivers Peter from prison? What does the ninja angel have to do to Peter? He has to wake him up. Did Peter know that he might die soon? Yes. And so can you imagine you might die tomorrow and you're going to sleep? I couldn't do that. All right, so talk to God. And the challenge of this is, let me just ask this. Do you remember the last time you really fixated on a prayer and you poured your heart out to God? Do you remember the last time you did that? All right, here's the next one, is talk to the godly. So you talk to God, you talk to the godly. Proverbs 12:25, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. Proverbs 15:23, to make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. So I grew up, my one memory of my great-grandma Burma when we visited her in the nursing home, well, she was on a rocking chair with her back hunched over like this, just going like this. And I remember asking my mom, what's wrong with Grandma Burma? And she said she just worries about everything. And that transferred to my grandma, and that transferred to my mom, and that transferred to me. And then when I'm converted, I'm studying with Andy every week. There were so many times where we'd be at a coffee shop and I would be worrying about this, worrying about that. God's put a lot of helpful people in my life that when I've been anxious or I've been frustrated about something, people that can have a good word, that can say the right thing at the right time, that can shift the way that you look at things. Your tongue has the power to change somebody's life. And so when we're trying to process this emotion or that emotion, how often are we going to godly people that can help us with that? So that's another thing. We need to have the kinds of relationships with one another where we're not just trying to impress each other, but we can actually be vulnerable and talk about things that matter. Thoughts or comments on that one? Yeah, and then you.
I like that you said that because those relationships will help you stay on the right path.
Yes.
You know, so it's not a matter of you just want to hear only what you want to hear. They're giving you godly advice so you can continue to run that race.
Yes. Now, when sometimes we have to be careful to not be like Job's friends, where it's like you go to somebody like, hey, I'm really worried. Like, I'm worried about this. That. Well, you said the word worry. And you know what Paul said in Philippians chapter 4? Be anxious for nothing. And what you're worried about is a violation. You know, the people that are too eager to give advice and not show sympathy oftentimes makes us what? Angry. And so I think we have to be careful in the way that we do help people and redirect and all of that kind of thing. And so, all right, anything else you want to say about this one? All right, let's talk about this one then. Talk to self. Now, for this one, I want to go to the psalm that represents Barry Kirchville's age. Psalm 77 is to talk to yourself. And we're gonna hover around verses 9 and following in a moment, but I want to build up to what's going on in this psalm. Look at Psalm 77. And the first 4 verses are going to describe the distress of Asaph. Look at verse 1. I cry aloud to God, and he will hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God, I moan. When I meditate, my spirit faints. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. All right, somebody, what's going on with Asaph in these first 4 verses? What emotions could you say he's feeling? Sadness, despair, weariness, all those things. Yeah, did you have something? Yeah, okay, yeah, good. All right, so this is what he's feeling. Have you ever had a time before where you were feeling lots of heavy things and the act of conversing with somebody changed your outlook? A lot of the Psalms are like that, where they begin with despair, they begin with heavy things, and the act of talking it out with God changes them at the end of the Psalm. This Psalm is kind of like that, but there's something going on here to do with meditation that's part of this, and we had that word in verse 3, but keep reading in verse 5. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my spirit made a diligent search. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? All right, how's he feeling here? Separated, isolated, anxious, what? No hope. So do you start to see that whenever you're looking, it's not like there's just, okay, this psalm is about this one emotion and this psalm is about this other emotion. Have you ever gone to Home Depot and you wanted to get a certain paint color? What do they do to get the certain paint color? They shoot in like 15 different colors and you're like, I don't know how that created that, but that did that. That's oftentimes what like, what color are you today? Well, it's a mixture of all these other things right now. That's kind of what's going on with the psalmist. All right, anything else you want to say through verse 9? Yes.
I think the important thing is like those things can coexist at the same time. It's like, yes, I'm scared, yes, I'm sad, yes, I'm alone, but you're there too. It's like both of those things can coexist and create this whole picture that should be, like content.
Yes. And we're going to see how he calms himself with these things. Yeah, Dathan?
I think the psalmist is reminding himself of who God is, his character.
Yes.
Which is something we see in the psalm, the forgottenness and so forth.
Yeah.
Which we have to, when we remind ourselves of God's character, then we almost feel the compassion and the love that God has for us and makes us want to persevere.
Yes, good. Let's keep going in verse 10. Then I said, all right, before I keep reading, who is he talking to? He's talking to himself here. Then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember the wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. And then he goes on to talk about different things that the Lord has done in the past. But what is he doing? This is my difficult situation. These are all the things that are happening in my life. I will choose to do what? Go back to God, and I'm going to remember to value and perceive God's power. If you did that enough, would that start to affect your emotions? It would. And now the last lesson that I'm going to do on Wednesday night, we're going to come back to this idea. We're going to look at another psalm that does this, where the writer talks to himself. But how often do we stop ourselves and go, you know what? I'm feeling all these things. I'm going to be honest about how I'm feeling about things, but I'm going to redirect my thoughts to the greatness of God. I'm going to remember that God let the Israelites through the Red Sea, and that's the same God that I serve. And I'm going to remember that God was the one that gave all the great victories in the book of Judges. And I'm worried about what's going on right now when this is the God that I serve. Ultimately, everything's going to be okay because we're Christians. And if we keep telling ourselves things like that, yeah, this is difficult right now. I don't like this. I don't like that. But this is how this psalm is. I think Psalm 77 is a great example of meditation. And we actually have the mind of Asaph being opened up to us on how to handle these things. Any thoughts or comments on what we're seeing here in Psalm 77? Yeah.
It almost feels like we're like reading his diary.
I know. Yeah, it's really neat.
It's like his journal, like watching him like process.
Yes.
I think, of course, is something totally new.
Yes, and if we were to read our diaries, would it say things like, if we keep reading in verse, say, 14, you are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. With your arm redeemed. You with your arm redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. He just keeps going on. The meditation of the glory of God calms your spirit down. The meditation of how much he loves you calms your spirit down. But we're assigned through social media and the news, be worried about this, be worried about that. We don't know what's going to happen now. We might all die. And what if we just washed these things over our heart instead? All right, so we got a few minutes. I have just a couple questions. We already kind of dealt with the first question, but let's think about the second question then. Which of the ways to steward your emotions, whether it's talking to God, talk to the godly, or talk to self, do you find the most challenging, and why? Andy?
Talking to other people.
And why?
Oh. That's why. The times that you try to talk to people about that, and you do get the judgment, or you do get the
Yeah.
judging, or you do get the, you're already feeling bad enough, or the embarrassment of even expressing it.
Yeah.
There's such a vulnerability in it.
Yeah. I think when we do talk to other people, and if they Job us, like Job's friends, if they Eliphaz us and stuff, it's like the reason that I brought this up is because I already know that it's a problem. And you're just doubling down that it's a problem. And I already know that. Like sometimes, guys especially want to be fixers. We want to fix everything. Okay, here's one. Sometimes the way to fix something is to just listen to somebody. All right. Any other answers to this one? Yeah.
Particularly on men, I would say stoicism is a strong impulse.
Yeah.
To not show emotion to others. And that often makes it hard to talk to people.
Yes.
Because you don't want to do that, culturally, whatever. And so that's a big hump to get over.
Yeah, I think oftentimes men have to be the ones that are strong and don't show that and stuff. Yeah.
Going back to talking to people, I think sometimes what could be hard is you want to talk to people that's going to only support how you think. So you don't want to get the criticism. And I think mostly of like Paul with Peter. I mean, there were 11 other apostles. None of them criticized Peter. Paul was the only one that told him, you're being a hypocrite.
Even Barnabas went along with them.
And even Barnabas was caught up with them. So I mean, I think the hard thing here is sometimes we want to immediately, when we talk to others, it's like this person is going to criticize the way I think, or it's going to challenge the way I think, and I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
So that's something that can be very difficult as well.
Yeah, and certainly we need criticism at times. But one of the things that my wife helped me understand about her is she would say, okay, this is what I'm struggling with right now. And before you say anything, I know that this is a sinful mindset. And so I already know that. I need somebody to help me process this. So don't come down on me because I'm bringing this up because I want help, and I already know I need it. So don't convince me that whatever. So, and I was like, oh, thanks, Samantha. That's really helpful. And so.
So it's the transparency behind.
Yes. Yeah. I think sometimes in how we open up to people, with the stewarding our emotions, it affects relationships. And so being wise in how we even bring things up. Brent, and then over here, and then over here.
Talking to self, I think everybody talks to themselves, but maybe not with the words and positivity of who God is. I think we more talk to ourselves about, in a negative, depressing way, like, why is this happening to me? This is terrible. Like the front half of every psalm, but not the back half.
Yeah,
of
right,
every psalm.
right. Yes. Good. We're going to talk more about that. There's a difference between listening to yourself talk and actually talking to yourself. But you,
Remembering who God is, when you have times of trouble, stress, things are happening, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're overwhelmed. To go to that, to go to God and for that calmness instead of doing a knee-jerk action and doing something really stupid.
yes.
Making bad mistakes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, back here. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, sometimes when we've already made that attempt and we feel that no one really has understood us, we may tend to back down and just kind of remain by ourselves. But
Yeah.
we need to just not give up and keep trying.
Yeah. Good. Good. Anything else? Yeah. Two over here.
As far as talking to yourself, I think sometimes you can get caught up in this endless loop and go down the rabbit hole.
Yep.
And not come to any kind of conclusion.
Yes. And then like Psalm 77, redirect, force yourself to think about God's greatness. Did you have something?
It's hard to come out and talk to someone, especially when you don't know if they're going to be offended and put it back on you, saying, well, how can you do better than me, or something like that.
Yeah. Good. Good. Anything else? All right. Yeah.
Just to add, on the talking to God one, I think some people, maybe this is just me, but some people feel like you can't do it and be honest, right? It's that sort of I can't approach. And I think we need the same mindset that says, hold on, I know this is sinful, God. You know this is sinful.
Yeah.
But I need to talk to you about it because I'm wrestling.
Yes. And God invites us to do that in the Psalms. Lament is a form of some of these things as well. All right. So the plan for tonight is to look at envy, and then tomorrow night we'll look at bitterness, and then we'll have a couple other lessons that deal with like the mixture of emotions, looking at it through a couple different passages. So thanks for your good discussion this morning, and I look forward to continuing this with all of y'all.
15-minute break.